Hey guys, welcome back to Pistons Talk Podcast. Hope you guys are having a great Saturday afternoon. Not afternoon, evening. I don't even know. I took a nap. I still think it was afternoon for whatever reason. We have a first time guest on the show tonight, Mikey. Mikey, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
So, what I like to do when we have a guest on is I'm going to give you the floor to plug yourself. Tell people where they can find you,
hmm
whether it's Twitter, social media, whatever you do, run in your spare time.
Yeah. So I am on Twitter. Twitter is what I'm mostly on. I'm very active on Twitter. My Twitter is just Mikey Pistons. I also have a YouTube channel I post on during the season, which is Mikey Talks Pistons. But most of the time, I'm going to be really active on Twitter. So that's where you'll see the most of me.
That's awesome, man. I love to see it. I love the fact that you reached out to me. Like you have
Yeah.
ambition. You told me like, hey, I want to do this. It's something I'm passionate about. Like you're only 16, so I do want to like give that because there's a lot of people out here that watch the show that are in their 40s that will not come on the show. You have
Yeah.
bigger balls than they do. Like
Yeah.
I respect the hell out of it, man. But we're gonna have a really good show. We're gonna get into the Karl Anthony Towns stuff.
Yeah.
So that was a huge trade. And it does affect the Detroit Pistons for people that aren't really aware of it. So I'm going to put the trade details on the screen. We can break it down and react to it because Troy Weaver is actually still helping out the New York Knicks, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So this is the trade. So the trade was Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, and a 2025 first to the Timberwolves via Detroit. Obviously, the Knicks are getting Karl Anthony Towns. So I want to kind of get like your reaction. What was your reaction to just that blockbuster trade last night when everyone was just like celebrating the Tigers and Shams just kind of ruined it?
Yeah, so I was celebrating the Tigers, but I saw this and I I didn't love it from either team's perspective. I understand Minnesota's side more because it's greedy ownership. I don't agree with it. They're trying to get under the hard cap, but it- so for them I can see it, but for the Knicks, I didn't like it originally. I thought they had something really good going, especially with the chemistry. But after it came out that Dante DiVincenzo might have been unhappy in his role, it kind of softened it a little bit. So I can see where both sides are doing it. I think the Knicks have arguably the best starting five, if not the best starting five in the NBA from top to bottom. Their spacing will be much better. But Minnesota, it's interesting because Karl Anthony Towns has been there through thick and thin.
Yeah.
He's been there through everything. And then they finally see success and they're throwing him. It's good on him that they're not throwing him to a bottom feeder. They're throwing him to one of the favorites. But just a very interesting trade and not something I saw coming at all.
Yeah, I was completely surprised. Like when I saw the tweet immediately, I was just like, is this like an NBA Sentinels troll? I was also just like, what? Like really? Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo, that's it?
Yeah.
But and the more you read about it, there was the Dante DiVincenzo stuff where he was saying like, I don't want to be coming off the bench, which
Yeah.
he's probably going to be
Yeah,
coming
that's
off the bench in Minnesota.
yeah, I saw
Like
that and I didn't understand. Does he think he's starting in Minnesota?
I have no idea. He's a hell of a player. Don't get me wrong. Just a
Yeah,
really
one of the
good three
best
point shooter.
shooters.
Yeah,
Yeah,
incredible
unbelievable.
3-point shooter. Um, when I kind of talked about this recently, it's Minnesota. If you look at their salary cap, while Karl Anthony Towns was on the roster, that was an incredibly expensive team, and obviously they are going to save some money trading for a guy in Julius Randle, who not the same type of player when you talk about Cat, who in my opinion is one of the best stretch fives in the NBA. They do get a little bit more bench depth with adding a Dante DiVincenzo, and you're going to have a front court of Rudy Gobert and Julius Randle, which we'll see what happens, see if it works. But I think at the end of the day, Minnesota was just trying to save money because they don't want to go into those apron taxes. For the Knicks, I love it personally. I think they're going all in. They've made so many trades. OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges this summer, and Cat. I think they're the biggest threat to the Celtics personally. But how this does relate to the Pistons. Now, if you remember, the Pistons made 3 trades in the 2020 NBA draft, and one of those trades was for Isaiah Stewart. Now, there are still protections on that pick, believe it or not, and the Knicks owned it, and the Knicks sent it to Minnesota. So we're going to break this down. So how this involves the Pistons. So our draft pick this year is top 13 protected. Most likely, unless the Pistons make a trade of their own like this, they're probably going to keep their pick this year. And 2025, I've heard that it's going to be one of the better draft classes with Cooper Flag, Ace Bailey, and much more. 2026, it's top 11. Again, unless the Pistons are, winning close to 40 games, they're probably going to keep that pick. 2027, it's top 9 protected. Who knows? I hope, and I'm sure you probably hope too, that the Pistons are not worried about a top 9 pick in 2027. But if it does not convert, if it doesn't convey, it turns into a second round pick, and the Pistons will be able to trade a first round pick in 2028. But were you kind of surprised that Minnesota has that pick now?
Yeah, I mean, it's the never-ending first-round pick. I know there was a lot of talk last year when we traded Bojan and Alec Burks. Like, are we going to get our pick back? This pick is just forever going to haunt us. It's just never going to come back to us. But I really hope that this pick does convey, not this year, but maybe even next year, top 11. I want to see us take that jump, even if it means giving up our first-round pick. Minnesota having it doesn't really affect us that much. But yeah, hopefully we can give Minnesota a pick within the next 3 years, because I don't want to watch 20-win basketball for 3 more years.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, like they started rebuilding in 2020.
Yeah.
And like I like Isaiah Stewart as a player, but the fact that there's still protections on this pick, and the Pistons were not able to get it back in the Alec Burks and Bojan Bogdanovic and the Quentin Grimes trade that you had mentioned. A lot of people thought we were getting it back. Obviously,
Yeah.
the Knicks had to hold on to it. And it's kind of funny, like that was the only first round pick that was exchanged in that trade. So it kind of tells you how valuable it is, because this pick has been tossed around like 5 times. I mean, I had to actually do some research this morning. I was like, Houston had it, then OKC, then Knicks, now Minnesota. I mean,
yeah,
it's absolutely insane though. But I think overall it's a pretty good trade for both teams. We're gonna have to wait and see if the Knicks like go all out and make a deep playoff run. But what I did want to also talk about is there was some news coming from Ian Begley. If you guys know who that is, he's a New York Knicks insider, and he had a tweet that the Detroit Pistons, Atlanta Hawks, Miami Heat were among the teams that talked to the Knicks for trading Julius Randle. So, Mikey, my question to you is, were you kind of surprised that the Pistons' name was in the Julius Randle sweepstakes?
I was surprised because I hadn't heard it yet. It wasn't something that had been talked about. But the more I thought about it, it really does make sense for us, a team that has been desperate for wing help. We got that somewhat in Tobias Harris. And I really think that it would be a solid fit. Julius Randle can create for himself. He can shoot somewhat well. He's very streaky. But I honestly would have thought that Julius Randle would be a pretty solid fit on the Pistons, similar to like the Jeremy Grant move, just a floor raiser, someone who's not going to let us win 14 games again.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that for like when we won 17 games, I was like, there's no way we're gonna like win less than 17 games. Like, boy, was I wrong. But yeah, I was kind of surprised though by this, and I think that the way I'm looking at it is Trajan has only drafted Ron Holland and Bobby Clipman. I guess they Bobby, not Bobby.
It's Bobby?
Yeah, it's Bobby Clipman.
Oh, I haven't heard that.
Yeah. So lost my train of thought for a little bit. It's all good. Trajan hasn't drafted, like guys like Cade, Ivy, Duran, Stu. The fact that Detroit called about Julius Randle, I think you can read the tea leaves a little bit. Trajan wants to upgrade the front court. Now, does that mean Isaiah Stewart is on his way out? I'm not sure. But if you kind of look at a Julius Randle and you kind of look at and Isaiah Stewart. Obviously, they're not the same type of players. But again, you can kind of get indication of what type of players Trajan Langdon is looking for. I think Julius Randle would be a good fit on this team. I mean, you could slide Tobias over at the 3 and Randle at the 4 if you really wanted to. I think it's interesting, though, that, the Pistons tried to put their hat in the Julius Randle sweepstakes. Obviously, we do not know what the Pistons offered. You guys can make assumptions in the chat if you are watching live on YouTube. I really don't know what the Pistons offered. I don't really think anyone knows what they offered. Maybe James Edwards knows what they offered. Have to ask James.
Not even anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, well, he's with the Knicks, so he would still know.
Yeah, maybe he would know, but I found it pretty interesting that they even attempted to, put their hat in that sweepstakes, but pretty interesting, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Trajan sees the writing on the wall. We've had these players with us for the 2020 draft, so this will be the 4th season with them, and we've been getting worse every single year. So eventually you're going to have to bite the bullet and take the risk of one of these players blooming in another city and trade them away to take on someone that will help you now, because we can't keep getting worse and worse and worse, because at a point that does stunt the development of the people that you care about.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's going to happen eventually. You have all these guys that you've drafted in the lottery. One of these guys is going to be a casualty, I think, this season, whether that's Asar, whether that's Ivy, whether that's Duran. I think if, to your point, they haven't really made progressions in the win column yet. If it's to a point where they have a similar season like last season, I 100% agree with you. Like, one of these guys is going to be traded. Trajan is going to have to bite the bullet and get players in here that can win more basketball games. But I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. We haven't even had training camp. We haven't even had open practice yet. Yeah. But pretty interesting that Trajan is looking at a Julius Randle, seeing what, the Pistons could possibly get for him. Now, we are going to transition over to a former Piston. Now, this one, to me, I kind of laughed at. Now, Evan Fournier basically called out the Detroit Pistons, and he said that playing for Paris or Team France in the Olympics gave him life versus playing for the Detroit Pistons. So, Mikey, what were your thoughts on that quote from Evan Fournier this week? And do you think he has a point saying that, it gave them life versus playing in a team with the Pistons? And he was a guy that praised Monty Williams, saying he was the best teacher he's ever had as a coach.
Yeah, well, Evan Fournier, it gives me life to know that I don't have to watch him next year. He was a very frustrating player to watch, in my opinion. But I definitely see where he's coming from. I think we saw it a lot, and I think that's one of the biggest problems I had with Monty Williams. I don't think the team culture and chemistry was good at all last year, and we obviously weren't playing well. So I think he could be talking from a perspective of being in a locker room that doesn't have good culture. He's a Monty Williams fan, but really the coach is instilling positivity to go to one of the better teams in the Olympics, and everybody's excited, amped up to be there. They all like each other rather than being in constant contention with the Pistons locker room.
Yeah, I saw some Pistons fans take 2 different approaches. Like your approach, I thought I saw a little bit, but I'm sure you know how Pistons fans are. You talk anything bad about not so much the team, but the city.
Yeah.
No fly zone, as we say over here.
Yeah.
Like, don't be coming back here. We'll get trick on your ass. Like, straight up. I can understand it from his perspective. He's playing with Victor Wembanyama. He's playing with a lot of great international players on Team France. But I took exception to it because I'm like, brother, you were terrible when you were on the Knicks. There's a reason why Tom Thibodeau wasn't playing you.
Yeah.
There's a reason why Monty Williams was playing you, and it wasn't because he thought that, you were a good player. It was just playing you because he didn't give a shit while he was here. Monty Williams just had a front row seat. Like, he was just going through the motions.
Yeah.
And the fact that the only NBA team that was reported that gave him a quote unquote contract was the Washington Wizards, which I kind of find hilarious. Because if you know who's in that front office, you know who's in that front office.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. Like any other player, I probably wouldn't even be talking about it. I'd be sweeping it under the rug. But I mean, this guy didn't even pass the ball, man. He was just looking to shoot 20 shots a game when he was out there.
Yeah, I mean, during the dog days of this season when we were winning 1 in every 20 games, you can probably go on my Twitter account and you'll find so much hate towards Evan Fournier. I was really frustrated. He was one of the more frustrating in this awful season. I had a really hard time watching him play.
Yeah, same here. Him and I don't want to throw any shade at this player, but like him and Killian Hayes frustrated the hell out of me. And like I was the biggest Killian Hayes supporter coming out of the draft. I mean, I have a Killian Hayes and Sekou Doumbouya jersey. You can tell what kind of sicko I am.
Yeah.
I should auction those off to see if someone would buy them.
I have 3 Killian Hayes jerseys.
Oh man, the Killian stock I sold last season. I was like, yeah, man, like wish him the best. Hope he gets a contract in Brooklyn. Like,
yeah,
you know, he's met his dad once, really good guy. But I mean,
yeah,
those are the type of players that, man. Like,
I think it was my 13th birthday. I went to a Pistons game and I had a sign that said, "My only wish for my birthday is to meet Killian Hayes." He was my favorite player, and I held on to his stock until I couldn't, which was about the middle of the first half of last season. Then I was like, okay, this guy doesn't have
it. Yeah, obviously. But enough about Evan Fournier. We're going to talk about a player. We're going to play a clip. So the Celtics had their media day this past week. And Jaylen Brown, surprise, was actually talking about your Detroit Pistons. This is what he had to say.
Finding different ways to lead also sometimes means that sacrifice where, you know, in a night we playing, don't mean to disrespect them, but the Detroit Pistons, who have struggled over the last year or two, you know, we're going to play through Peyton, let him go for 30. And play through Sam, let him shoot 10 threes tonight. We're going to still win the game. You know, it don't have to be the normal way, but that gives those guys confidence. That gives those guys ability to run free, and we're going to need that down the line.
So that's what Jaylen Brown had to say about your Detroit Pistons, Mikey. So I want to know, what were your kind of initial thoughts when you heard this from JB?
I mean, he's the reigning NBA Finals MVP. He has all the room. He can talk however he wants. The one thing I find funny is that was one of the games, especially on our losing streak, that we were in the driver's seat for 75% of that game. Cade took us into overtime. I mean, the Celtics did not dominate us by any means. I would have appreciated it if he took a shot at the Wizards or a team like that, especially after how we played them. But I'm not going to say he was wrong, because if you play through a player like Peyton Pritchard, you probably would let him drop 30 and still win the game.
Yeah, I to your point, I do remember that game. Pistons were up big at halftime. Obviously, everyone's just like, is this the game that they're going to beat the Celtics? And the Celtics were one of the best teams in the NBA last year, and they won the championship this year. And to your point, yeah, Jaylen Brown was a big reason for why they won an NBA championship last year.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like it was kind of a cheap shot in a sense where they needed overtime to beat the Detroit Pistons and Cade Cunningham and company.
Yeah. You
could have just said, you know, rebuilding teams. You didn't even have to say the Detroit Pistons. You didn't have to say like the Washington Wizards and others. If I'm Cade Cunningham and the Pistons, I'm circling the Boston Celtics on my calendar, because it seems like every other week, Mikey, the Pistons are getting some kind of shade, whether it's a player, former player, media members, even, you know, people that are Tigers fans. I saw last night saying Pistons were congratulating the Tigers. A bunch of Tigers fans are like, "Oh, don't curse us with your bad juju." I was just like, man, like what the hell's going on right now? But
yeah.
I honestly think that if I'm the Pistons, if I'm a young player like Cade, Ivy, Duran, Asar, like I am circling the Celtics on my calendar, and, you know, showing up trying to beat them, trying to say, hey, like, don't take us as a joke, like, take us seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the team like the Celtics will probably get us every time, but we really put a fight against them. That's why it's kind of a blindsided hit. Like, you're calling us out when we played great against you guys that game. I think we had a 25-point lead at halftime.
Yeah, I think we did. I think some people are also saying, like, when we played them later in the season, and they were just featuring their role players, which, it's late towards the season, March, April. A lot of playoff teams aren't really trying. Maybe that's what he was trying to say. Like, they're already locked into the playoffs. They're not really going to take them seriously. Waste energy. They're going to, conserve their energy for opponents that could possibly, take them out of that, 1 seed or 2 seed, whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, I think if you're a fan or even a player on the Detroit Pistons, like, that's some disrespect. And I think at the end of the day, you should definitely, get up for that game. Get up when we play the Celtics. And I believe we play the Celtics pretty early in the year. So it'll be a good test to see where this team is at and if the players are even aware of Jaylen Brown throwing shade at them.
I think the players are definitely aware. These new age players are definitely on social media. They definitely see this, which I think could be a good thing. This team needs a driving force behind them. And I think if you keep getting disrespected like this, it's going to take a toll on you and you're going to force it to change.
Yeah, I do. I think that, they need a chip on their shoulder. They need people like saying, like, come on, it's the Pistons. Really? Yeah. Like, you need to light a fire under their ass. And I know JB is one of those coaches where he's just not going to fold his arms on the sideline. Like, he'll yell, he'll get in their face, which I think is needed. But I also think Jaylen Brown calling them out also, maybe it's some motivation for them to, come out and, play a full 48 minutes and try to get a big win over a playoff team that's looking to, repeat as back-to-back champions. But we do have one more topic. And it was Cade Cunningham. Now, I'm going to play a little interview, and this is courtesy of Bally Sports Detroit. So they were asking him about the Tigers' success. And obviously, last night, they clinched their first playoff berth in over 10 years since 2014. But this is Cade talking with Bally Sports Detroit.
Yeah, it's really cool to watch. That's how we want to be. Seeing the Lions do the same thing. Everybody in Detroit is doing that. So I believe we're next. And like Oren said, only the best is to come.
So what were your thoughts on Cade Cunningham saying that the Pistons are next to try to be that next Detroit team to make some noise?
Yeah, I really like that. That's where his mind goes, especially in a time of celebration. Everyone's a Tigers fan. I had a long tweet last night where I was saying, I'm so happy. I've been a diehard Tigers fan. But the Pistons, when the Pistons are in the playoff hunt, even in the play-in, the fans are going to show out more than they would for maybe any other team besides the Lions, because Detroit basketball has just always been a big thing. And I think Cade will be the one to lead us there. I think he's one of I'm going to call him a star, one of the stars that's going to stay in the city that he was drafted to. I could be totally wrong, but I really like that his head is there, and I trust Cade that he's going to be the one to lead us too.
I do too. Yeah, he's the type of player. Like, if the Pistons weren't fully committed on Cade Cunningham, it wouldn't have got a contract extension this summer. Yeah. Like, that was an investment. That was a long-term investment. It wasn't given like what he's done throughout his early young career to the Pistons. They gave him $200 million because they believe in his potential and they believe he can be a centerpiece that they can start to build around. And you saw this past offseason with Trajan Langdon, the players that he brought in, the floor spacers that he brought in. And I think for Cade, you're going into year 4. You haven't won a whole lot of games to start off your career. Obviously, he was injured his second year. But I think this is a prove-it season for him. This is a prove-it season for the Pistons as well. Because there's been a lot of discourse with his name. I mean, I was talking with Czar last week. Czar snapped for a good 15 minutes. If you guys haven't watched that video, I posted it yesterday. He was in his bag. But I honestly think I love this mindset from Cade Cunningham. That's the mindset that your franchise player needs to have. You know, he didn't have to show up to that StockX event. He could have just stayed home, you know, getting ready for the season. But he was taking questions from the media. And seeing what the Tigers have done, I think should be motivational for the Pistons, because the Tigers had a 0.2% chance of making the playoffs, and they just got hot at the right time, and now they're in the playoffs. Obviously, they lost tonight, but I think it was because all the champagne and the beer they were popping last night in the locker room. But hey, man, like, honestly, I love this mindset. I love to hear it. That's what I want my franchise player to say when you're, you know, hit with hard questions from the media.
Yeah. I think Cade is a really good leader. I think has really good responses when he gets asked questions by the media. And he has every building and every tool that shows that he could be the face of this franchise. And I think he will be. I love that he's out there supporting the Tigers and at the StockX event, talking about the Tigers. And when you have sellout crowds a month after your team was 8 games under 500, I think that will show, like, especially the players, even the new free agents, Malik Beasley, Tobias. Well, Tobias has been here. How much Detroit cares about their sports, and it will also give them a chip on their shoulder that they want to give them something to celebrate with Pistons basketball.
Yeah,
because I truly think we have some of the best fans in the world.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that, I've always told people that watch this podcast or even like interacting on Twitter, like, Detroit has some of the most passionate fans in the world. Lions games are basically sold out. You have to get in line for season tickets. They have a winning product on the floor. The Detroit Red Wings, they got really close to the playoffs, but that arena is top 10 in attendance every year. Even when they were bad, they were top 10 in attendance. When the Pistons are good, man, like when they were in the playoffs against the Bucks, that place was so loud and so electric. And obviously they got swept. But the fact that the team made the playoffs, it gave something for the city to get excited about. Good basketball. Like, when the Pistons are good, it's so good for the NBA. And it's so good for the city of Detroit when all of our teams are good. And you're seeing it right now with the Lions, the Red Wings, and the Tigers.
Yeah. All the teams are on track to be good at the same time, which is going to make Detroit one of the best sports towns in the country, which we deserved after that 5-year stretch where we had nothing. We had nothing.
Yeah. I mean, if you would have told me that the Detroit Tigers would have made the playoffs before the Pistons and the Red Wings, I would have laughed in your face. I don't know about you. I was 100%. Like, yeah, right, man. Yeah, right. We do have some questions actually for you, because we do like to do Q&A questions after, you know, the topics are over with the podcast. Obviously, this is a short podcast. You guys do apologize. We usually go like crazy, like 2 hours sometimes, but there's not a whole lot to talk about. We do have media day though coming up on Monday at 12:30.
Yeah.
Don't know whether or not they're going to live stream it. I'd assume they're going to, but
yeah,
if I do hear anything, if I hear anything or if I see it, I'll post it for you guys. But we do have some questions we're going to get to, and this was something that happened, I believe, yesterday. Didn't really put it in the prep sheet because I'm not too sure. I did read about it, but what do you think about Tom Gores buying 27% stock in the Los Angeles Chargers?
I think it just shows that he's making investments in other things. The Chargers are a growing brand. They're in the LA market. I really don't think that it has much to do with the Pistons. I mean, the guy has plenty of money. I don't think just because he buys one thing, that means he's going to sell the other thing. He has more than enough money to hold on to both of them. And I was very critical of him about halfway through the season when he was nowhere to be found. But he kind of did a full 360 on my perception of him. I actually kind of appreciate his ownership. I do think he really cares about the Pistons' success.
I think he cares, and this might not be popular for people listening because a lot of people, dog on them, they trash
Yeah.
them. I think a lot of times what you see is when a new owner comes into purchasing a team, like you saw it with Matt Ishbia, they get rid of everybody that was there for years.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Gores did the same thing. He fired Joe Dumars, who was with the organization for 30 plus years, a lot as a player and a little bit as a general manager. I think he's realizing that, trying to go for the big fish, trying to go for the big fish coaches, trying to trade for a star, you need good people in the front office. And he gave Trajan Langdon a chance. Like, if this was Tom Gores maybe 5 years ago, no shot Trajan Langdon would even have got an interview. No shot.
Yeah.
He was a younger guy that worked his way up the ranks, and he got the job. And I find it very interesting that the two finalists for that job, Dennis Lindsey and Trajan Langdon, they're both working together in the front office, which I think the more people you have in that front office, then Dennis Lindsey, especially, you're getting a lot of the right people to rewrite the ship. And Trajan Langdon fired so many people that maybe a lot of podcasters haven't talked about. Like, he got rid of all the medical staff. We have a brand new medical staff, brand new strength and conditioning coaches, nutritionists. Like, he's trying to get this right. He's trying to get this train back on track, which I'm happy about. But to answer your question, King, I don't really think too much of it because at the end of the day, when I read the article from NBC Sports, they said Tom Gores would not be involved in any way, shape, or form. No business decisions, no acquisitions in terms of players they go after, trades they make. This is just him basically investing, because that $1.5 billion could turn into like $3 to $6 billion in the next couple of years if Jim Harbaugh brings a championship to the LA Chargers. Like, LA's a huge market. And I think for him, it was just a business acquisition. I don't really think this indicates that Tom Gores is looking to sell the Detroit Pistons, because if you kind of look at it, he bought it for $300 million and now they're worth $3 billion. So he's made 10 times his money over since purchasing the team. And I don't think he's going to go anywhere soon.
Yeah, I don't either. And I hope he doesn't go anywhere soon, which I would call you crazy if you said I'd be saying that about 8 months ago.
Yeah, I mean, he's done, I think, a lot of reflecting recently, especially because he was, flying his jet out to Monty Williams, giving him $100 million, and he's eating $100 million. He's like, hey, my mistake.
That's what really made me do the full 360. I really don't know how many owners in the NBA would admit their mistake and eat all that money. I really, really gained my respect from him when he did that, when he admitted he made a big mistake.
Yeah, like I said, he hasn't done the winning he thought he would. And I think, the Monty hire had to happen. And I'm glad it kind of happened last year because, say they roll out with Casey and they let him go after the final year of his contract and he tries to go after a big fish. It could have been this summer. Right. And the coaches this summer weren't really anything crazy. But to your point, I think he's learning, he's growing, he's being more aware of his decisions. So Ryan Boseman, who wants to know your starting lineup and what you thought of the offseason. So I'll let you take the floor with this one.
All right, I'll start with the offseason because the starting lineup might – I don't know. We'll see. But so the offseason, I was very happy with the offseason. I think a move that gets swept under the rug quite a bit is the Tim Hardaway move, where he was great for the first half of the season, leading candidate for Sixth Man of the Year. I do think we'll see him in the rotation. I think he could contribute a decent amount. And we finally got shooters. Every year we've been asking for it. Every year we've been hoping somebody would break out this. We're not relying on somebody to break out. We got shooters. Tobias Harris can shoot. Malik Beasley is a great shooter. Tim Hardaway is a good shooter. We got shooters, which I think was our biggest problem last year. We'd have people. I love Asar Thompson. I'm one of the biggest fans of him. But he'd be standing in the corner and nobody really had to guard him because he's shooting like 12% from the corner. And we're not going to have that this year. We're going to have Asar where he should be, and we're going to have shooters where they should be. I also like JB Bickerstaff. I like him because I think he is a really good leader, and that's what we need. This team had no culture, no chemistry, nothing last year. At least that's what it looked like from an outside view. And I also like that he worked with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. And the two guard thing is really hard to coach, and I think that he has experience in that. I think he can really optimize Cade and Ivy together. Okay, my starting lineup. Cade's obviously at the 1. Duran's at the center. I'm gonna have Tobias at the 4. I'm gonna have Malik Beasley at the 2. And I'm going to have Asar at the 3.
Okay. So that's kind of – I've gone back and forth with 2 positions, and it's shooting guard and small forward.
Yeah.
I was talking with Koo from Locked On Pistons. Shout out to him. And I want to give him this credit. He had Asar at the 2, which I was like – that's the first time I've heard it, like personally. I was like, I think if his handle was a little tighter, I could buy in with it. But I think you have to have Asar out there. Now, there's also an argument of, like, why not just go all offense, go Simone Fontecchio with the 3 and just have nothing but shooters and spacing surrounding Cade Cunningham. My only argument to that would probably be, like, you need at least some defenders because you're not going to be stopping teams defensively with just all perimeter spacing and offensive guys. You need some defensive guys. You need some, perimeter defenders like Asar out there. But I think your starting lineup is a starting lineup that I've seen a lot of Pistons fans have. I know some people want to give that starting 2-guard shot to starting 2-guard spot to Jaden Ivey, which I think the writing is kind of on the wall that they didn't go out and target a backup point guard. I think that is going to be his role. But we're going to have to wait and see what happens with preseason and rotations. But if you read articles over at Pistons.com, Keith Langlo's kind of like pinpointed that, like, yeah, they didn't go out and get a backup point guard. And Jaden Ivey's really good with the ball in his hands. Like, that's a carved niche and a carved role for him. Just because he's off the bench doesn't mean he can't share the floor with Cade Cunningham. And I think that's what gets lost in these conversations with starting lineups. Like, Jaden Ivey can still come off the bench, but play 30 minutes a game. He can still be out there with Cade Cunningham in situations. It's just not going to be, he's in the starting lineup each and every night. And, maybe Jaden Ivey proves himself and he's a little bit more consistent as a shooter out there. And maybe he is in the backcourt with Cade Cunningham. But I think your starting lineup is pretty spot on with people that, I've had on this podcast over this offseason so far.
Yeah, I think the only thing that is really a hard decision is Asar and Simone Fontecchio. And I give it to Asar just because of the defensive standpoint. You have Malik Beasley, who's a great offensive player. Cade's a great offensive player. And you have Duran, who's not a great defender. That was one of my biggest concerns going into this season is how is Jaylen Duran going to be on the defensive side of the ball? And I think you put Asar in there to kind of neutralize the defensive output of the team. And Ivy being on the bench, I like because when Cade missed those 5-6 games and they had Ivy playing the point guard, I think Ivy excels with the ball in his hand. And I think last year with our all bench rotations, which I hated, our all bench rotations, we didn't have somebody who could really control the floor, which I think you always need, or you're going to go into 10-point deficits, 20-point deficits.
Yeah, I don't think you have to worry about all bench lineups with JB Bickerstaff. I don't. You don't even see that in high school. And I covered a lot of high school basketball last year. These coaches do not do all bench lineups. Like, they don't even do it at the high school level. The fact that we're doing it at the NBA level is actually comical. I had some high school coaches texting me. He's like, I would never do that with my rotations. My rotations are like 7 to 8 deep. Like, what is this guy doing? Is he trying to get fired? Like, what the hell's going on?
And it's not like we have a team like the Celtics or a team that's really deep. We were putting out players that should not be getting NBA minutes just to have a 5-man bench lineup. It was one of the more frustrating things I've ever seen.
All I can do is laugh at it now because it was comical last year. Like some of the stuff that was just like, it's like, wow, I was like, hey, why not, man?
Yeah.
This is another question from King, which I haven't really thought about it. He wants to know if we think Paul Reed could take Isaiah Stewart's role this season.
Well, it depends. I think Stu is a 5, not a 4, and I think he will be playing the bench 5. And I mean, yeah, Paul Reed could overtake Stu. I think they play similarly. Reed's smaller, but I think it is Stu's spot to lose, though. The backup center. I think it is going to be his position to lose.
I think this is a great question, King. My thing with the Paul Reed signing was I liked it because you're getting another guy in the rotation that can play, can shoot, play make, and protect the rim a little bit. This has been my take on it. I don't think the backup center position is going to be locked in stone this year. I think there'll be games where Isaiah Stewart gets the backup 5 minutes, but I also could see games where Paul Reed gets the backup 5 minutes. And, maybe JB Bickerstaff goes crazy and has a 2 big bench lineup with both of these guys out there together. Because I think they're versatile to play with each other.
Yeah, for sure. Stu is a great shooter, which you could really put him with any other big on the floor, as long as the big is good at defense, which is why I think the Stu and Duren lineup didn't work, because you had the spacing, but then the defense when those two were on the court was not good.
Yeah, it was more on Duren's side because
100%. I think Stu's a good defender.
Yeah, it's not that I don't think Stu couldn't be in the starting lineup. I just think when you have a center that has all the physical tools to be a rim protector, I don't know if it was the mental part of the game. I don't know if we were expecting too much out of him going into his second year. I think sometimes we forget that Duren's only 20 years old. He can't even legally buy a drink yet.
Yeah.
I think sometimes fans get a little bit hard on him, but I'm expecting good things out of him because we saw last year there were flashes. Like the Chicago game is one game that I still have in my memory. Like he was protecting the rim, he was a lob threat, he was crashing the glass hard. He was playing, both ends of the floor. So I think you've seen flashes of Duren and the type of player that he could become in the NBA. It's just I think some Pistons fans have to be a little bit patient, have to remind themselves that this kid's only 20 years old and he's not a finished product yet.
Yeah, I think it's an easy trap to fall into because you see people like Victor Wembanyama, Paolo Banchero, these guys who come into the league and they're automatically great starters, winning players, and then they forget about the guys that take a while to develop. So it's definitely way too early to give up on Duren, and I think he's going to be a great NBA player.
Yeah, same here. We'll do one more question. We can wrap this podcast up. So this comes from Devon. Shout out to Devon. His question was, with Randle being in rumors, what does it say about the Pistons? Brandon Ingram, another player. So here's the thing. I want to kind of talk about Brandon Ingram for a minute. I think a lot of people look at Trajan Langdon, where he came from, look at Brandon Ingram and the situation that's happening in New Orleans. He did not get a contract extension. He's asking for huge amounts of money. He's in the last year of a $30+ million contract. I think the Pistons will be active in the trade market. And if you look at the contracts that Trajan gave, they were 2-year and 1-year deals. He's keeping flexibility open, Devon. So what I would say, what does this say about the Pistons? I think the Pistons are being very smart with their money. They're being smart with their contracts. And when the time comes for Trajan Langdon to make that big move that I think a lot of Pistons are very anxious about, I think those are the type of players he's looking at. He's looking for another complementary piece to be Cade's number 2. And this season, it's obviously going to be Tobias Harris, but we know Tobias Harris is not going to be a long-term solution. Now, if a player does become available, like a Randle, like a BI, like you had mentioned, I think Trajan Langdon will try to pull the trigger if the price is right.
Yeah, I do think he'll be aggressive. It will be very dependent on the price. I don't think he's going to go throw everything. And the fact that we have this never-ending first-round pick out there still makes it very hard because we don't have very much flexibility. It's not like we can throw 3 first-round picks at a player like Karl Anthony Towns or whatever it's going to take. We don't have that. So it's going to have to be someone who's on the last year of a contract. The team's not going to pay them, and we're going to take the risk. So a player like BI, I could see coming in, especially because our wings are the biggest question mark on our team, I think. And I do think we will be active if the price is right.
I do think we did upgrade the wings like significantly.
Yeah.
If you kind of consider that Isaiah Livers and Kevin Knox last year was our best wing, him and Asar were like our best wings. Trajan is kind of obsessed with wings. Like, you saw the training camp deals, and he went out and signed like some former, G League guys from the Pelicans. He signed a guy that was with JB in Cleveland. He's anti Troy Weaver. Like, Troy Weaver was like allergic to wings. Trajan Langdon's like obsessed with wings. It's so weird to kind of see how these general managers and these front office executives, the type of archetype of players that they do like. But Devon, I won't be surprised the next year or so if the Pistons try to make a needle mover move, because I know a lot of Pistons fans, a phrase that I see on Twitter all the time is it's not a needle mover. I think we have to see how JB Bickerstaff coaches these players. We have to see how they're used, what their roles are, and I think we'll have a better understanding of what type of players that they want to build around JB Bickerstaff, Cade Cunningham, and company. But I don't think it's going to be too long, because eventually you're going to have to get that number 2 or that 1A, 1B with Cade Cunningham, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you can always hope that a player like Jaden Ivey, Asar Thompson, Jalen Duren is going to grow into that 1A, 1B with Cade Cunningham. But the reality is they could be very good players, but you're going to need to trade for another player to be complementary to Cade. So I agree with you that we will see movement soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you had mentioned, you'd like it to be the players that you drafted. You'd like it to, be Asar if he can develop a jump shot. I mean, you brought in Fred Vincent. You'd like it to be Ivy, but the Pistons' track record for developing talent isn't the best. If anything, it's actually pretty bad. So they've made most of their moves. I mean, you can go back, like when they traded for Rasheed Wallace, he was a missing piece. I mean, when they traded for Blake, obviously they didn't win a championship. They didn't really have deep playoff runs, but Blake was a player that changed the franchise, in my opinion. He was a piece that helped them win more basketball games. Yeah. I think eventually you'll see an all-star caliber player that maybe the Pistons are interested in. Maybe it's a year or 2 left on the deal. I mean, in Randall's case, there's 2 years left on his deal, and Trajan at least made an offer for him. Now, whether he, considered offering Stu or a young piece, we don't really know. But the fact that, he's getting the ball rolling, making calls to upgrade the roster is something that I can respect, and something that I don't think we've probably seen since Stan Van Gundy was running the show.
Yeah, Troy Weaver was very complacent. He really only did those prove-it deals where he would sign players like James Wiseman. And I like the aggressiveness. It's something we need, and it's something all championship teams need. Yeah,
same here. I think Troy's thing was his whole strategy was getting ping pong balls and collecting centers.
Yeah.
Which, hey, man, like if that's your strategy, cool. But it obviously didn't work. They're collecting centers in Washington, but Troy's not the general manager over there, which I kind of find funny. I mean, they have some of the Pistons' old players in Sadiq Bey and Marvin Bagley. And
is Livers still there?
Yeah, Livers too.
Yeah,
so I mean, it's pretty crazy. Washington will probably be better this year, but I mean, it's kind of funny. But I do appreciate you coming on, Mikey. I know this is something that you wanted to do, and I do appreciate you hopping on for an hour or so. But I do want to give you the floor again to plug your Twitter and tell people where they can follow you at, and just interact with you.
Yeah, so I really appreciate you having me on. I've listened for a while, and it means a lot for you giving me a chance. And my Twitter for anybody watching is Mikey Pistons or Mikey Talks Pistons. You'll see my face on there. And I'm very active on Twitter during the season. The YouTube channel is the same name, Mikey Talks Pistons. I just make like game recaps, breaking news, all that kind of stuff. I just really try and build a community as best as I can. And I want to stay in touch with the whole Pistons community.
I appreciate you reaching out. Like I said, it takes a lot of courage to come on here and do what you're doing at such a young age. Like at 16, man, like I probably couldn't repeat what I was doing at 16 years old. Like I really couldn't without YouTube ripping down this video. But we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. But I do have your Twitter in the description below for people that do want to follow you and support you. Hopefully we see you as like a journalist, a couple of years down the road, covering a team or covering a college team. We'll definitely keep in touch with you, have you on the show again, because awesome. I do like to, keep having people on because I like to build relationships with everyone in the community. But I do appreciate your time. Appreciate everyone watching right now. I got about 300 people in here right now watching on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. But we will see you guys next week. Take care and have a great weekend. Later.